Welcome to 21st Sports recap and reaction for the Atlanta Falcons at the Jacksonville Jaguars in their Week 15 matchup played December 20th, 2015. We're going to go over the scores and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis for this game where both teams are still playing for their playoff life as the Falcons had lost the last 7 games in a row and desperately needed a victory here to keep alive in the playoff hunt. As they were still alive with a win, they would be alive for that 6th spot, although they would need the Vikings to lose out. And Jacksonville came into the game just 1 game back in the AFC South, and with a win they could potentially move into 2nd place as the Colts and Texans were facing off. But in this game, the Falcons would get on the board first. Devonta Freeman scored on a 5-yard touchdown run. Shayne Graham added the extra point, and it was 7-0. Falcons over the Jaguars just over 4 minutes into this game. That was the only score in the first quarter. Then in the second quarter, less than a minute in, Jason Myers kicked a 42-yard field goal to put Jacksonville's first points on the board, as it was now Atlanta 7, Jacksonville 3. Then with a little less than 4 minutes left before halftime, Matt Ryan hit Julio Jones for an 11-yard touchdown pass. Shayne Graham added the extra point, and it was now 14-3. Falcons extending their lead to 11 over the Jaguars. Then right before halftime, Ishmael would pick off Blake Bortles to set up a 34-yard field goal by Shayne Graham, as the first half came to a close with the score Atlanta 17, Jacksonville 3. So the Falcons were up by 14 points at halftime. Then in the third quarter, the Jaguars got the ball first, and they would score on their first possession. Blake Bortles would end up scoring on a 1-yard run. Jason Myers added the extra point, and now the Jaguars were within 7 with the score Atlanta 17, Jacksonville 10. Posluszny would end up intercepting Matt Ryan to set up a touchdown with about 6 minutes left in this game by Blake Bortles to Allen Robinson, a 10-yard touchdown pass. Myers added the extra point, and this game was tied at 17 apiece. So an interception by the Falcons of Blake Bortles right before halftime to put them up by 14, and now an interception by Posluszny would end up leading to the tying score by the Jaguars. So it's tied up after 3, but then in the fourth, about 4.5 minutes in, Shayne Graham kicked a 33-yard field goal to put the Falcons back in the lead by 3 with the score Atlanta 20, Jacksonville 17. Then in the final minutes of the game, Graham would add another field goal as he kicked the 46-yarder to put Atlanta up 23-17. The Jaguars would get the ball with a shot to win this game down by 6 with less than 2 minutes left, and they would start with it on their own 11. And on 2nd and 10 from the 11, Bortles went to Lee. He picked up 30 yards in the first down at the Jacksonville 41. But they were not able to move the ball past the 41. They did get it up to the 48, but Bortles was sacked on 2nd down by Claiborne, and on 4th down, he threw a second straight incomplete pass as he had thrown one on 3rd down as well. They turned the ball over on downs, and the Falcons brought this game to a close with a pair of knees in the victory formation by Matt Ryan. So Atlanta finally ends their losing streak, getting back in the win column after starting out 6-0. They lost the last 7 games, but now they're 7-7 with this victory. Their final road game of the year is they're now 4-4 on the road. They got 2 home games left to play, and they're still alive in the NFC for that 6th seed, as the Vikings are 2 games ahead of them. But if the Falcons can win out and the Vikings lose out, then the Falcons could get that 6th seed. Of course, they're going to have to do something no team has done all year long, and that's beat the Panthers. Of course, that game is in Atlanta next week, and then they have the Saints in Week 17 also at home. So that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to beat their 2 division rivals if they want to make the playoffs. But by winning this game against Jacksonville, they do still have playoff life. Jacksonville now falls to 5-9, and they're 2 games behind the Houston Texans now in the AFC South. 1 game behind the Colts, as the Texans would end up beating the Colts on this same day. Jacksonville, this is their final home game, is they're 500 on the year at home, 4-4. They had a chance to go above 500 on the year at home, but they're 500 in Jacksonville. They are still in a position where I do believe they're alive, technically, if Houston lost out and the Colts lost out, because they do, they beat the Colts last week, and then next week they face the Saints, which is interesting that the Falcons and the Jaguars both face the Saints in the final 2 weeks. Jacksonville in week 16 and Atlanta in week 17. Of course, Jacksonville's going to New Orleans, and then New Orleans goes to Atlanta in the final week of the regular season. But Jacksonville finishes up with Houston, also on the road, a road game for the Jaguars. I believe if they can beat the Saints and beat the Texans, and if the Texans lose next week, then I think Jacksonville could still possibly take the South. As crazy as that sounds, if my math is correct on that one. But if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments section below. But in this game for Atlanta, Matt Ryan had a pretty good day as he ended up leading the Falcons to the victory. And Julio Jones actually scored a touchdown for the first time in almost 2 months. So Julio Jones had a trouble getting into the end zone, but he finally ends that drought as the Falcons win this game. But in this one, Matt Ryan ended up throwing for 246 passing yards. He was 22 for 35. He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Devonta Freeman had 25 carries for 56 yards and a touchdown. He also had 7 receptions for 45 yards, which gave him 101 total yards on the day. And Julio Jones, as I mentioned, he got his first touchdown in almost 2 months. He had 9 receptions for 118 yards. Blake Bortles was 23 for 38 with 297 passing yards. He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception as well. He also had a rushing touchdown, as he had 6 carries for 44 yards, and he ended the day as the leading rusher for Jacksonville. Denard Robinson had 14 carries for just 28 yards, averaging just 2 yards per carry. He did, however, have 8 receptions for 46 yards, as he ended up the day with 76 total yards. And Julius Thomas had 6 receptions for 79 yards. Allen Robinson, 3 receptions for 57 yards, including a touchdown. The kickers in this game for Atlanta, Shayne Graham was 3 for 3 on the field goals, 2 for 2 on the extra points. He was perfect. Myers was 1 for 1 on the field goals, 2 for 2 on the extra points for Jason Myers. And for the Falcons on defense, Wheeler had a sack and a forced fumble. Babineau also had a forced fumble. Claiborne had a sack, and Ishmael had an interception. And for the Jaguars, Posluszny had an interception. Oderek had a sack. Team stats, 22 first downs for the Falcons, 21 first downs for the Jags. And the Falcons on third down were 7 of 14, 50% conversion rate. Jacksonville 0 for 8, 0%. They also went for it once on fourth, did not convert there either, as they could not buy a first down on third. As the Falcons actually coming up big on that down, that clutch down. The total net yards in this game, 357 for Jacksonville, 328 for Atlanta. And on the ground, the Falcons netted 83 yards, the Jags 72. Through the air, Jacksonville netted 285. Bortles sacked twice for a loss of 12 yards total. And for the Falcons, they netted 245 through the air. Ryan sacked once for a loss of 1 yard. Penalties in this game, both teams had 5 penalties, but Jacksonville 62 penalty yards, 43 penalty yards for Atlanta. The Jaguars did have 3 fumbles, but they recovered all 3. They did not lose any. And in the red zone, Jacksonville was 2 for 3, 66%. Atlanta 2 for 5, 40%. In time of possession, 34 minutes, 33 seconds for the Falcons. 25 minutes, 27 seconds for the Jaguars. So Atlanta finally getting a win. It seems like it's been so long. It almost seemed like it had been a whole nother season ago. as it had been almost a half a season since they had won a game. Things started out so good for the Falcons, and it's amazing that it's still possible that they could find their way in the playoffs. However unlikely, but stranger things have happened. It is mathematically possible, and anything's possible. You never know what's going to happen. Their best bet is to win the next 2 games, and then they can go into the playoffs potentially with a 3-game winning streak if they can manage to do that. Jacksonville, on the other hand, this loss really hurt them. They needed to win this one. I think they're still alive, but they're on life support. Whereas if they had won this game, they'd be right in the same position as the Colts. They'd be 1 game back of Houston, and they would be facing Houston in Week 17, and that, and of course, New Orleans next week. And that's not a gimme, especially when it's in New Orleans. They've been playing better at home this year, as they started off kind of rough in the beginning of the season, but they kind of been getting some wins down there in the Big Easy. But it ain't easy in the Big Easy. But in this game, the Falcons, Julio Jones finally coming back alive, having a nice game. And their defense also, they're putting the pressure on, they're forcing turnovers, even though they weren't necessarily recovering all those fumbles. Still, they're playing some pretty hard defense, and both these defenses are underrated. They're both making moves, and they're both, on the rise. Of course, they're going through some growing pains. But I think the Falcons, even if they probably won't make the playoffs, you never know. It's still possible, but I think they're actually on the verge of having a big year next year. Of course, we'll see what they do in the off season, and this year's not over yet, so we'll see what happens. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and had a great weekend, and have a great week, and enjoy all the sports.